The state of Florida is breaking tourism records again. Governor Ron DeSantis says more than 142 million visitors came to the state last year.
Florida has long been a world-renowned paradise, a magnet for millions of visitors each year. But what happens when leaders entrusted with its economy turn their back on its biggest source of wealth? Imagine losing nearly $40 billion not to a disaster or pandemic, but to political missteps. And that's what happened here, when the most loyal customers, who spent tens of thousands each, suddenly vanished overnight. The shock wasn't just the loss, it was that it could have been prevented. This is the story of how political choices drove away tourists, shuttered businesses, and threatened livelihoods across the Sunshine State. Tourism's hidden backbone. When most people think about Florida's economy, images of theme parks, sunny beaches, and bustling resorts come to mind. But beneath this familiar surface lies a lesser-known truth. A significant part of Florida's economic strength depends on Canadian snowbirds. These seasonal residents don't just visit for a week or two like typical tourists. They live in Florida for the entire winter. Their extended stays mean they inject far more money into the local economies through groceries, dining, shopping, and daily services than short-term visitors ever could. On average, a Canadian snowbird household spends around $33,000 during their seasonal stay. That money fuels small businesses, supports restaurant staff, and keeps local retailers and service industries afloat during months that would otherwise be slow. Entire communities, especially along Florida's southern coast and Gulf regions, have grown reliant on this winter influx to maintain year-round economic stability. Without them, the quiet season would be starkly different, not just in terms of foot traffic, but in actual survival for many local enterprises. This deep economic relationship has built up over decades, fostering not only commerce, but also a sense of community. Snowbirds have established favorite restaurants, golf courses, grocery stores, and service providers. They shop in local markets, attend social events, and contribute to property values through long-term rental arrangements and seasonal home purchases. They don't just visit, they become part of Florida's social and economic fabric in ways few tourists ever do. Yet, despite this essential role, the importance of Canadian snowbirds often remains invisible to many. They are steady, reliable, and willing to spend, but still far from the headlines when it comes to Florida's tourism marketing or policy discussions. The state's economy pulses with life because of these seasonal residents, but the full extent of how reliant Florida has become on them has not always been widely recognized or appreciated by those making decisions at the state level. While Florida's sunny climate and natural beauty are undeniably attractive, the real secret behind its tourism resilience is this consistent, loyal market of Canadian visitors. These aren't just tourists passing through. They are economic lifelines during months when other regions face downturns. Without them, Florida's economic engine would sputter, particularly in less glamorous but critical small towns and suburbs that depend on these seasonal dollars. Strangely, this reality has only recently begun to draw attention, and not for positive reasons. As political tensions have risen south of the border, the behavior of these key customers has become a clear indicator of mounting trouble.
As the snow begins to melt and the days get longer, many Canadians wintering in the U.S. are making plans to come home.
When their numbers start to drop, the effects ripple far beyond the tourist hotspots and enter the core of the state's economy. For now, the stage is set to explore exactly how Florida ended up pushing away these invaluable visitors. The next question is why such a crucial segment of Florida's tourism market would suddenly disappear. This is no fleeting trend or natural market shift. It's a direct result of political and economic forces colliding in unexpected and damaging ways. The answers lie in decisions both inside and outside Florida's borders, where rhetoric and policies have created an alarming backlash. Before revealing the full story, it's important to understand that Florida's tourism success was never incidental. It stemmed from careful cultivation of markets like the Canadian snowbirds, who keep the state humming in the off-season and make Florida a year-round destination. Losing them is a blow far greater than simple visitor counts can convey, and the consequences will shape Florida's economy for years to come. If this dependence is Florida's secret weapon, then what could have damaged such a powerful engine? The reasons start to come into focus when you look at the political friction building between the United States and Canada in recent years, and how that friction eventually landed squarely on Florida's doorstep. There's more to this coming shift than just cross-border tensions. Deeper political miscalculations lie beneath, as well as missed warnings. But before we dive into those mistakes, let's examine exactly how the political climate began to erode the relationship between Florida and its most devoted tourists. When political tensions erupt, even economies built on trust and habit can suddenly unravel. Political tensions erode tourism. Political rhetoric and policy choices have a powerful impact on tourism, even if it's not always immediately obvious. In Florida's case, relations between the United States and Canada worsened in recent years, especially with controversial statements made at the highest levels of government. Former President Trump's remarks, calling Canada the 51st state and imposing tariffs, created a profound sense of alienation among many Canadians.
Well, we can always, look, what I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
That resentment didn't stay confined to Washington. It spilled south, affecting how Canadians viewed the entire country, including Florida. What made things worse was that Canadians didn't simply get mad at Trump's administration. They became broadly disillusioned with the United States as a whole. Florida, as part of the U.S., became an unintended casualty of this diplomatic friction. The result was an 80% drop in Canadian tourists visiting Florida, a staggering decline confirmed by Congressman Jared Moskowitz. When your biggest winter visitors disappear almost overnight, an entire economic sector feels the shock. Richard Cleet, a hotel owner in Hollywood, Florida, witnessed this firsthand. He saw Canadian guests dwindle by half compared to the previous winter. Many expressed frustration and disappointment at how their prime minister was treated, choosing to boycott traveling to the United States altogether. These weren't abstract statistics. These were loyal customers with real financial power deciding to spend their money elsewhere, sending a clear message about how political attitudes overseas could translate into economic loss for Florida. This sudden withdrawal acted like a sharp blow to parts of Florida already set on thin margins during the winter months. The timing couldn't have been worse. Tourism related to Canadian snowbirds accounted for an essential part of the state's seasonal economy, and to suddenly lose such a vital customer base was akin to cutting off a lifeline. The direct economic consequences quickly began to show in hotel occupancy rates, restaurant bookings, and retail sales. What is tragic about the situation is that the decline in the market was not due to the natural shifts in the market or the global crisis, but rather to the political negligence and the utter failure to predict the consequences of the damaging words and policies in terms of the relationships with other states. The politicians and business leaders of Florida were mere spectators, with no power to influence the situation, as the market of high-spending tourists, which was very much alive, vanished, and no one could take up a feasible scheme to either stop or reverse the decay. To make things worse, some of the state's decisions would contribute to the problem. Rather than trying to mend relations with the visitors and market Florida strongly to keep them, the political class of the state increased the alienation policies for the visitors. They seemed to be receiving the alerts too late, and instead of correcting their wrongs, the state seemed to be speeding up its way to a dangerous path. This not only had a terrible impact on the tourism numbers, but also on the whole local economy that had been built around those numbers.
The drop in tourism is tied to a mix of factors: political tensions, tariffs, and stricter immigration enforcement.
The loss of Canadian tourist arrivals was only one factor in the growing storm that would drive Florida's economy towards an avoidable crisis. Increasing political tensions and the imposition of tariffs left the disparity between the government's actions and the economic reality open for more conflict. It is important to realize how the deteriorating situation of the conflict led to the closing of businesses and the loss of jobs, in order to understand the full extent of the economic damage inflicted on Florida. Hence, along with the vanishing of Canadian tourists, the visible signs of economic distress started to appear in Florida's communities. It was not only a matter of off-season empty hotel rooms, but also the slow-motion economic collapse that was gradually taking place in those towns that relied on the customers' presence to support them through winter to the next winter. Those empty rooms and quiet streets told a story far beyond numbers, one that affected real people and businesses struggling to keep their doors open. Economic fallout on local businesses. The disappearance of Canadian snowbirds hit Florida's local economies like a tidal wave. Hotels that once thrived during the winter months found half their rooms empty. Restaurants that depended on loyal seasonal guests saw reservations dry up. Retail shops faced declining sales as the predictable cycle of spending was broken. In areas such as Fort Myers Beach and Clearwater, the signs were unmistakable. For sale signs popped up on properties that were once winter homes, and boarded-up stores began to outnumber open ones. Richard Cleet's hotels in Hollywood, Florida, offer a concrete example of how devastating the Canadian tourist drop was. Losing 50% of his regular guests meant fewer bookings, fewer staff needed, and an uncertain financial future. This was not isolated. Thousands of business owners across the state who rely on these visitors felt the sting. Many restaurant servers, hotel workers, and small business employees faced reduced hours or layoffs, shaking the very communities those tourists helped construct. Local economies had enjoyed the steady rhythm Canadian snowbirds provided. These visitors put down roots each winter, supplying more than just one-time tourist dollars. They created a reliable demand for goods and services over months. Their relationships with local businesses gave owners stability and confidence to invest and expand. Losing this audience didn't just cut off income, it cut off future growth and community well-being. The crunch also extended into the housing market. Seasonal rental homes, a staple for snowbirds, found themselves vacant. Property owners struggled to find tenants, and many faced mounting maintenance costs without offsetting income. The momentum that came from these snowbirds' reliable presence began reversing, leaving pockets of uncertainty and despair in towns built around winter tourism. This economic fallout went beyond the hospitality sector. Gas stations, grocery stores, golf courses, and event venues all felt the ripple effects of fewer visitors. The intricate web of businesses reliant on tourists unraveled
Tourism tax revenue is down in Orange County for the 5th month in a row,
as each sector inched closer to financial distress. Jobs that once supported families in Florida became increasingly scarce, forcing many workers to seek employment elsewhere or survive on diminished wages. Some local leaders tried to sound the alarm, but political distractions and conflicting priorities at the state level diluted their voices. Instead of mobilizing to support affected businesses or crafting strategies to regain Canadian trust, efforts were indecisive or contradictory. Many entrepreneurs were left to navigate the crisis on their own, while the state veered toward decisions that might make matters worse. Indeed, the worsening crisis took an unimaginable turn when Florida lawmakers proposed measures that jeopardized tourism infrastructure just as visitor numbers were plummeting. The coming controversy would put Florida's fragile recovery at even greater risk, deepening economic wounds and angering those who depended on the state's vibrant, visitor-driven economy. The unraveling relationship between Florida's economy and its most valuable tourists was already a crisis. What happened next would transform that crisis into an economic emergency that few predicted, but many feared. The decisions Florida politicians made next didn't just fail to help. Their consequences threatened to unravel the state's entire tourism framework. The Tourist Development Council's controversy. Just as the loss of Canadian snowbirds rattled Florida's tourism industry, state politicians moved to make a controversial decision that shocked many. They proposed eliminating all 62 tourist development councils across Florida. These councils, often overlooked by the average visitor, function much like the state's sales team for tourism. Funded through hotel taxes, they play a crucial role in marketing Florida's attractions worldwide, organizing events, restoring beaches, and ensuring that visitors have reasons to come and stay longer. Tourist development councils have historically acted as the lifeblood of Florida's tourism infrastructure. By pooling resources, they fund advertising campaigns that reach international audiences, arrange sports tournaments that attract large crowds, and maintain public spaces that define the Florida experience. Their work goes beyond flashy promotion. They build the foundation that keeps Florida competitive in a global tourism marketplace where destinations fight fiercely for attention. The proposal to scrap these councils was framed by some politicians as a move toward fiscal responsibility, a way to cut government waste and reduce spending. But critics saw it as economic self-sabotage of the highest order. Eliminating the councils would effectively dismantle Florida's coordinated approach to tourism marketing and development, removing the very mechanisms that drive visitor numbers and sustain local economies. Supporters of the bill argued that the savings could be passed on to residents in the form of property tax breaks, painting the move as a win for Florida taxpayers. Yet, this argument ignored a harsh economic reality. The roughly $2 billion collected annually through these hotel taxes generated tens of billions in economic activity, jobs, and wages. Sacramento-based studies showed that without these councils, Florida's economy would take a catastrophic hit. Robert Scrow, executive director of Destinations Florida, described the plan bluntly as economic sabotage. He warned that abolishing tourism promotion would endanger the livelihoods of more than 2 million Floridians, hotel workers, restaurant servers, small business owners, and countless families relying on the income tourism generates. The metaphor frequently utilized to depict this choice is quite accurate. It's like dismissing the whole marketing department of a firm and afterward asking why the sales are so bad. It takes no time for the effects to be felt when the workers, whose main responsibility is bringing in visitors, are suddenly laid off. The small communities and the less glamorous destinations risk becoming invisible without coordinated marketing, and thus losing their market to the competitors. On the other hand, the cuts that were proposed were damaging not only theoretically but also practically. The timing could not be worse, since Florida had already been suffering due to the reduction in the number of tourists from Canada.
The beach in Hollywood, Florida. And here's a view of the amazing...
The timing worsened an already dark situation by taking away essential support from a tourism sector that was in dire need of attentive and invested support. Instead of safeguarding the state's most important economic watermelon, Florida's leaders seemed to be working against it. The whole affair revealed clearly that political priorities were miles apart from economic realities. The overwhelming majority of the public, with a good number of entrepreneurs and managers, saw the cutting back of the taxes as the opening move of a giant domino that would end with a calamitous fall of the whole tourism industry in Florida. While the politicians that took care of their images for the next elections, and even the ideologies of their parties, over the economy in the industry that was already proven to be good. A measure that was supposed to be economically wise drowned the tourism economy in Florida, or at least deepened the turmoil. The future of a strongly interwoven industry that creates and sustains millions of jobs and generates billions of economic activities was not only about the politics, but also about the nature of the integrity of the industry. This was the main concern of the people as the bill moved through the legislature. A look at the devastating numbers that Florida was going to lose would soon reveal the real expense of this decision. The sobering numbers reveal a math so illogical it almost defies belief. But it's real, and the stakes could not be higher. Unpacking the numbers, tourist development councils collectively raised nearly $2 billion annually from hotel taxes to fund their vital operations. While that might sound like a large sum, it's a fraction of the economic engine these funds powered. An analysis by Florida Politics warned that eliminating these councils would cause a $37 billion blow to the state's economy, a figure that dwarfs the initial savings suggested by lawmakers. More alarming still, the loss would translate into $22.5 billion in lost wages, putting jobs at risk for millions of workers. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represent real families who depend on stable employment in hospitality, service, and small business sectors. Every dollar cut reverberates through countless households across Florida, threatening their ability to put food on the table and pay bills. To put this in perspective, Florida politicians were willing to sacrifice tens of billions of dollars in economic activity just to give residents a $60 property tax break. The comparison is stark and painful. It's like burning down a house to save a little on the electric bill. The short-term political gain barely scratches the surface against the enormous downside that comes with such drastic cuts. Robert Scro's description of the move as economic sabotage wasn't hyperbole. This decision tampered with the very forces that had made Florida a tourism giant. With no other effective strategy for replacing these millions in promotional funding, the state stood to lose ground, not only to its international competitors, but also to other U.S. states that continued investing aggressively in tourism marketing. The impact goes beyond dollars and jobs. Tourist development councils attracted major sporting events, conventions, and cultural festivals that brought in millions of dollars per event. Without their funding, many communities would lose the ability to host these economic drivers. The ripple effects would reach far past beachside resorts, cutting deeply into regional economies. Many would assume that Florida's natural appeal alone would keep tourists coming. But the reality is more complex. Destinations like Hawaii and California have similar climates and attractions, yet they continue to thrive due to sustained marketing efforts. Florida's reputation requires active maintenance, or it risks being overshadowed by equally sunny, well-marketed alternatives. Ignoring these facts, Florida politicians proceeded with budget cuts, while Canadian tourists continued to decline sharply. By mid-2025, Canadian visitation dropped over 25% compared to the previous year, and many Canadians turned to alternative vacation destinations like Brazil and Europe. The hole created by losing Canadian snowbirds only grew larger as Florida's promotional capacity weakened. Florida was at a crossroads. The numbers made it clear. Dismantling the tools that built the state's tourism success would exact a devastating toll. Yet the political will to prevent this disaster appeared lacking, leaving the future of Florida's economic engine hanging by a fraying thread. With the foundational support for marketing and promotion under threat, Florida's ability to compete on the global stage was slipping away, just as the challenges to its tourism industry were deepening. The marketing battle for tourists. Tourism isn't just about sunshine. Anyone can claim that. What truly defines a top destination is marketing. Florida's rise as a global tourism powerhouse was no accident. It came from decades of strategic promotion, showcasing its beaches, theme parks, and cultural attractions.
Florida's natural advantages haven't changed. The beaches are still beautiful.
Tourist development councils served as the state's megaphone, ensuring the world knew what Florida had to offer. But competition for tourism dollars is fierce. Mexico, the Caribbean, and other U.S. states constantly fight for visitors' attention. When Florida's marketing weakens, competitors quickly move in to capture market share. Without sustained promotion, destinations fade from travelers' minds, replaced by fresher, better-promoted alternatives. Florida's councils fund campaigns promoting everything from Disney vacations to major sports tournaments and festivals. These events rely on strong attendance to remain viable. When marketing slows, visitor flow drops, threatening local economies, jobs, and businesses that depend on tourism. Despite these clear stakes, some politicians viewed marketing budgets as expendable, assuming Florida's reputation could sustain itself. Yet, tourism is never static. Other sunny destinations spend heavily on outreach, maintaining visibility and loyalty. Florida's brand, by contrast, requires constant cultivation to stay competitive. As Annie Holcomb, a vacation rental executive in Panama City, noted, "You don't stop marketing when you're on top. Her words capture the core truth. Tourism success demands relentless effort. Cutting or pausing marketing at a high point risks unraveling years of progress, giving rivals an opening to surge ahead. These reductions affected sports tourism the most among the sectors. Events like tournaments that bring in millions of dollars rely heavily on development councils for both funding and marketing. Once that support is taken away, the localities lose the right to host big tournaments along with their visitors, income, and international exposure. The impact radiates out to worldwide travel as well. Choices are based on perceptions, and as the visibility of Florida decreased, Canadian tourists, once the faithful seasonal residents, looked for other places. Florida lost its attraction and gained less, while Brazil, Europe, and even inter-Canadian locations became more attractive. What was once a huge Canadian market quickly became a small one, thus losing billions in spending. The decline was no longer a theory by mid-2025. It showed itself through closed hotels, shuttered shops, and a drop in visitor numbers. The overestimation of Florida's success in the past prevented leaders from realizing the need to quickly renew the marketing efforts. At the same time, the rivals rejoiced at the situation, and one by one, they started to attract the tourists that Florida had neglected. Florida's promotional wheels turned slowly, and so did its international recognition. The decay might have looked slow, but in a market where attention is the key to success, a short marketing lapse can easily change the slow decline into a steep fall. Leadership that ignores these warning signs can deepen the damage, turning economic uncertainty into a crisis. Leadership, ignoring reality. Amid a mounting economic crisis, Florida's political leadership appeared disconnected from reality. At the 2025 Florida Governor's Conference on Tourism, Governor Ron DeSantis highlighted overall visitor numbers but ignored the collapse in Canadian visitors. While boasting that 34.4 million people had visited in the second quarter.
Tourists keep flocking to Florida, state officials touting another record quarter, 34.4 million visitors.
He omitted that only 640,000 were Canadians, a 20% drop from the previous year. Rather than confronting the crisis head-on, officials tried to spin the situation positively. Brian Griffin, President and CEO of Visit Florida, pointed to more visitors from countries like Brazil to offset Canadian losses. But this comparison misses the larger point. Different tourists bring vastly different spending patterns, stays, and impacts. Replacing high-spending, long-term Canadians with short-term travelers cannot fill the economic gap. Such responses reveal a troubling divide between political messaging and economic truth. The government's reluctance to acknowledge the depth of the problem weakened confidence in both the industry and local communities already struggling. It suggested that economic pain was temporary or too politically inconvenient to address. This disconnect went beyond rhetoric. As Canadian visitors disappeared and businesses faltered, state leaders cut tourism marketing funds, further eroding the industry's ability to recover. Instead of mobilizing resources to rebuild relationships and stabilize tourism, leaders prioritized ideological fights over practical solutions. Workers and small business owners bore the brunt of this inaction. Hotel staff faced layoffs, servers lost shifts, and shop owners watched loyal winter guests vanish. Their hardships stood in sharp contrast to the optimistic tone of official statements. Ignoring these warning signs also damaged trust with Florida's most loyal visitors. Canadian snowbirds, once integral to the state's economic and social life, felt unwelcome amid hostile rhetoric that alienated their country. Decades of goodwill, built on familiarity and repeat visits, eroded quickly when leaders appeared indifferent to their absence. Industry leaders, too, watched in frustration as political agendas overshadowed sound economic policy. Many warned that no amount of management expertise could overcome decisions that drove away key customers and slashed essential marketing budgets. The irony is glaring. Florida promotes itself as free and welcoming, yet its actions have alienated entire nationalities of visitors. Families, workers, and local businesses are left paying the price. Sustaining a world-class tourism economy requires leadership grounded in economic reality, not political theater. As crucial winter seasons approach and Canadian travel continues to decline, Florida faces a defining choice: confront the truth or continue down a path of denial. The state's economic future depends on it. When those tasked with leading turn away from reality, even the brightest economic prospects can dim quickly. What's next for Florida? Florida's tourism industry, once the envy of the world, faces an uncertain future. In 2024, the state welcomed nearly 143 million visitors, generating over $150 billion and supporting more than 2 million jobs. Yet political decisions have cast a shadow over this success, raising urgent questions about how Florida can recover and rebuild trust with its most important visitors. Few states rely on tourism more, and the stakes could not be higher. Rebuilding that trust will take years. Canadian snowbirds, once loyal seasonal residents, now have many options. Increasingly, they are choosing destinations where they feel respected and welcome: Brazil, Europe, or even staying closer to home. Their choices reflect not only economics, but also perception. Florida's political missteps have created a reputational problem that marketing alone can't fix. Replacing Canadian visitors with other international tourists is not simple. Different groups have unique spending patterns, stay durations, and loyalty levels. Canadians integrate into communities, patronize local businesses, and provide steady demand. Losing this dependable base will be difficult to offset, if it's possible at all. Politically, Florida stands at a crossroads. Will leaders learn from the damage caused by ideological decisions, or continue sacrificing long-term prosperity for short-term political gains? Repairing relationships with key markets requires humility, consistent outreach, and policies that welcome global visitors. Without such action, the state risks sliding toward stagnation. Local businesses and employees feel the uncertainty very much. Palpably, hotels, restaurants, and small enterprises rely on constant visitors for their survival. Massive job cuts are likely to be permanent if there is no stable rise in tourism. It is not only an economic aspect, but also a human matter, implying an impact on families and communities tethered to tourism. On the other hand, rival places have taken advantage of this situation. They are drawing events, conventions, and travelers who used to prefer Florida. Overcoming the loss of market share is an arduous task, particularly when opponents continue to invest in the hospitality and marketing sectors gradually. Nevertheless, Florida's natural as well as cultural assets are still the best. The beaches are still gorgeous. Disney World is still the biggest and the most visited theme park, and the Everglades remain the most interesting place to visit. The main problem is not the product, but rather the perception. The next chapter of Florida will be written by restoring trust and reconnecting with tourists. Florida's story is a warning. It tells us how political beliefs and poor decisions can together wipe out years of development. The tourism industry is based on trust and relationships. These may take a lot longer to rebuild once broken. The question of whether or not Florida will be able to change its policy depends on the availability of such leadership that would prioritize the economy over politics and unity over division. The story of Florida reveals the high cost when leaders turn away their best customers, sacrificing prosperity for politics. Recovery will require rebuilding trust, investing wisely, and embracing the diverse visitors who make this state thrive. If you found this breakdown insightful, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the intersection of politics and economics. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out the next video on your screen for another story that connects policy, people, and the power of choice.